What can we learn from other teams that failed to defend the championship, and where does the Bucks post-title years actually rank compared to other recent champions? We dig into a very interesting recent history coming up next.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. On today's show, we teased this yesterday when we went through some of the missteps the Bucks have had these last 5 years, but how many other teams have experienced the same type of issues since winning their championship? So we're going to go one by one through recent champs and look at the years that followed, how it treated them. Now, I am excluding the Oklahoma City Thunder and the New York Knicks, given the recency there. There is nothing to comp the Knicks to, and the Thunder's just been one season. So there's one spot where I actually use the Thunder that we'll get into at the end of the show. But we're basically looking at what does that leave us with in the last 6 teams to win a championship and how things have gone, what have been the major changes they have made, some ups and downs they've experienced, how good they have been in the postseason, and how that relates to the Bucks. I was pretty surprised when I ripped through this list because we'll get to it in the comparisons, but full transparency here, the objective of this was to figure out, have the Bucks actually had the worst title hangover? Like, have they navigated those waters worse than any other team that's recently won a championship? And I'm not going to reveal my answer yet, but it's closer than you would think between a handful of teams. So we'll just start with it. The first team we examined was the Toronto Raptors, who won the title in 2019. You can say, well, they won the title because of Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson getting injured in the finals. But look, you could say the Bucks won the title because Kevin Durant wore the wrong size shoe. So you need health, you need to be good, and you need luck on your side to win a championship. Raptors got all 3 of them. The Bucks got all 3 of those in 2021. So how they've changed. Well, they rolled the dice on Kawhi Leonard that season. He eventually walked in free agency. They got nothing to show for it. And same story with Fred VanVleet, where remember the lead up to that deadline of they should really trade him, and they didn't. He walked for nothing. That's basically it in terms of, miscues, I suppose you would label it as. They did trade Pascal Siakam, but that was a team that was kind of rebuilding and saying, were best served, and OG Anunoby, to be fair. So that was, I would lump that one in, OG's absence with Kawhi and Fred VanVleet. But it was a team that was saying, time to start to build towards the future here. They did get a pretty big leap from Scotty Barnes, especially in the playoffs last year, that really helped them pivot towards that. And we think what's old is new again, and Kawhi Leonard is going to be back in Toronto momentarily here. They did fire a coach since winning a championship. It was within, 2 years of that 3 years of that title win. And they've won 12 playoff games since winning the title in 2019. We'll get to the comps here, but I'll quickly rip through the other teams. The Lakers. They traded AD, but turned him into Luka Doncic. They had LeBron James injuries that piled up. They basically rebuilt the roster on the fly. They fired 2 head coaches. They made the playoffs 5 out of 6 seasons that would follow winning the title. Back to the Raptors, they made the playoffs in just 3 out of 7 seasons. And they won 16 playoff games since winning the title. The Bucks, we know that the changes they've gone through, it's been well documented. They have also fired not only 2, but 3 coaches. They've won 11 playoff games and made the playoffs in 4 of 5 seasons. The last 3 here, the Warriors, one of the more surprising ones, fired no one, turned Andrew Wiggins into Jimmy Butler. They leaned into veterans, haven't really moved past being a play-in team for the most part. They've also won 11 playoff games and made the playoffs in 2 of 4 seasons. You had the Nuggets, who fired Michael Malone. They've made the playoffs all 3 seasons since winning the title. They've won 16 playoff games, and now it feels like they're reshaping the roster era that we've witnessed the Bucks go through, the Warriors go through, the Lakers, and so on. And then the Celtics, who have won 9 playoff games. Nobody fired, but they have started to go through those personnel changes and have been in the playoffs in each of those 2 seasons since winning the title. So what stands out to me is, other than the Raptors, you had a lot of teams that it felt like were essentially hanging on, that you reached the top of the mountain and then you started to coast because you realized we ran out of gas, and we'll see how far we can coast once we reach level footing here. And it eventually runs out after 3-4 years. It seems like the Raptors were the clear, let's start to pivot and rebuild here. They had that 1 year where they were playing in Tampa after COVID and everything else, and obviously the unique situation with Kawhi, that kind of made them a separate entity. But you, for the most part, had teams that were consistently in the playoffs, just not consistently finding success in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think for Toronto in particular, because they kind of kick off the parity era of everything, where we have a different understanding of what it takes to win a championship now and what it might look like to repeat and how difficult that is. Like, it was always difficult to repeat, but in the current era of the NBA, having different champions since 2019 at this point, where it's like you can see just how quickly these windows come and they go. Toronto does feel like the one that's kind of like the oddball one of them, because they, of the 6 teams here, well, the Bucks are now entering into that, we're like the only one who clearly went, let's rebuild now and let's see what we can get out of that. Like, they surprised the year after the championship when no one really knew what to expect from them after losing Kawhi. And then it's like, okay, they still found a way to win far more games than what I expected in that next year. But then they hit that bottom point. I think it was that Tampa season, that COVID year, where it was like, okay, this isn't going to work too much longer. Let's actually start this rebuild. Let's figure this out and go from there. So when they started their rebuild, 3 years ago now at this point, kind of got to the bottom of the bottom, but to see where they are now, which feels like a position where they can continue to grow, that's where you hope the Bucks get to as the other team of these past champions who have actually said, let's do a rebuild here, because the Lakers tried to re-up with vets. The Golden State Warriors tried to re-up with vets. The Nuggets kept trying to just kind of retool around what they had and count on guys, and lost some vets along the way, but brought other guys in to try to replace them. And then for Boston, the most recent of the champions that we're talking about, their story is so interesting because, like, their title defense year, Tatum, has the Achilles injury. And then you go into this past season that we just had, where it's like the expectations for Boston weren't high yet. And still Jaylen Brown went out there and said, no, we are still a top team in the East. Then they traded the guy. So, like, their situation is so different, because even within that, they had like the cap squeeze where they got rid of a lot of key parts from that championship team as well. So, like, the pathway that each of these teams have taken since their championship is so interesting. Had the Lakers not found a way to get Luka, they quite possibly could have been in this bucket as well. Although they're the Lakers, they would try to find someone to come in. But yeah, that Luka trade really changed the landscape for them in particular.
Yeah, just to close that point too, the Raptors won 53 games the year after winning the title, and when Kawhi had left in free agency, I believe that was the 2 seed in the Eastern Conference that season, and then played in Tampa and only won 27 in the 72 game season, but was a 500 or better team the next 2 seasons. And then, to your point, said, let's go in a different direction here. Their rebuild lasted 2 years, as they won 46 games last year with the really emergence of Scotty Barnes. So that would have been basically the timeline for the Bucks, the summer of 23 or 24, to say, okay, let's rebuild, to soft rebuild, relaunch to the point where of now, basically this season, you'd be saying we're coming out of it now. So the path not taken for the Bucks is what the Raptors did, and we'll see what it bears here if that Kawhi deal goes through, and what that means for Toronto in the Eastern Conference. We went through the total wins for each of these teams. Playoff series wins since their title, I think, is another interesting thing to point to. So we'll get to that. And the number that stood out the absolute most to me, that really speaks to the parity era and where things are headed now in this version of the league. We'll get to those things coming up next.
Running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of different systems that were never designed to actually work together. An app for accounting, another app for inventory, another app for sales, and somehow none of them actually talk to each other along the way. And that's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every single part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, everything works in one place. Odoo is one platform to manage, grow, and scale your business. The best organizations know that success isn't just about talent. It's about having everyone working towards the same goal. That's true in sports, just like it is in business. And we're spending today's episode talking about roster moves, how teams are figuring out where their next steps are and how the Bucks look in their rebuild. And when looking at the ones who've had success, you can always tell it wasn't a reactionary move. The organization normally has a vision, sticks to it, and then you see the results because everyone was working from the same playbook. Organizations win because operations matter, and that's why you should get Odoo. So try it for free today at odoo.com/locked on. That's ODOO.com/locked on.
So one of the other things that really stood out to me, we went through the series or games won in the playoffs, correct? For each of these teams. Playoff series one is the other interesting thing. But of all those teams, and I think I gave away the figures already, but do you know who has won the most games in the playoffs since winning their championship of those 6 teams?
The most games or the most series?
Most games.
The most games, I believe it's the Nuggets from that
Nuggets
bunch.
and Lakers have each won 16. The fewest is pretty obvious. It's the Celtics because that was the most recent. But your other question about series and who has won the most series since winning their championship, do you know who that is?
My guess would be the Lakers on that one. Yeah. My guess is Lakers.
It is the Lakers who have won 3 series since that title. The Nuggets have won 2. The Warriors have won 2. And that is it for teams that have won more than one series. So that is really my bigger takeaway, Camille, is if we include the Oklahoma City Thunder here, since we do have a following seasons postseason to base it off of, the last 7 teams that have won the championship, how many combined series would you guess they have won?
Ooh, combined. Let's see. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to guess 9. No, let me go 10. I'm going to guess 10.
12. So still, on average, fewer than 2 per each team. They have won fewer than 2 series since winning the championship. So, I mean, again, it plays into the parity era. And I think it is not just like we've made a lot over the CBA and the structure of building out your team, the constraints that are placed on you as you get to that level and pay to keep guys. You enter the first and second aprons and what that means for you. That is a big component. But I think the bigger component, or just as big, that we have not talked about quite as much, and I think these numbers more than anything back it up, is the style of play and how that has changed to do that for 100+ games that we're talking about. If you got to win 16 and you're already playing 82 regular season games, to keep up that style of play that long. And again, like we talked about, you win the title, you're still good because of the makeup of your roster, that it's just like a ripple effect that you're kind of drained. It carries into next season. It keeps depleting everything before it eventually catches up with you. I think this, more than anything, makes it pretty clear. Like, do everything you can to get it. But once you get it, it's congrats. Start thinking about your exit route here. What's your exit strategy? Because the longevity piece, I've talked about windows basically being 3 years. I truly believe that. And again, looking through the series and games won in the postseason for each of these teams, because of how expensive your roster gets, because you have to pay to keep those role players that you have to make tough decisions on and say, yeah, thank you for everything that you did for us. We can't pay you $20 million when we're paying these two guys 50 or 60 or more. That starts to eat away at your roster. But playing this style of play in the league now, where your bigs have to cover as much ground as they do, where injuries are becoming what they are, and for that to carry from October all the way into mid-June, late June, that takes its toll just as much as the second apron does.
It does. It takes a big toll on a player, on a team, on the whole operation. Because even when I think about the Bucks and what we talked about on yesterday's show about the coaching turning point and getting rid of Mike Budenholzer, where at that point in time, it felt like, hey, this voice is not working in this locker room anymore. So this is what we have to change going forward. Now, the funny thing is that after the changes that were made, and seeing things that have come out and seeing like how Giannis, when they went to Phoenix, was reportedly going on and on about how great of a coach Mike Budenholzer was. And, they didn't know how good they had it in Phoenix, but it was like, a year or two ago, this locker room was not feeling that way about Mike Budenholzer and everything that was going on with
Not
that.
Not just this locker room, maybe the narrator of that tale too.
The fans too, but fans always turn quicker than the locker room does, it feels like. So that is what they had fire buzz stuff at the championship parade, which that still blows my mind. But
I mean the player that was leading that charge about great Bud was.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it's hard because there's so many different factors that have to go into play, which for me, this upcoming season, looking at these past champions, I'm very much looking forward to seeing how this upcoming season plays out for the Celtics and Nuggets in particular, with those being the two most recent champions that we're evaluating here in this exercise, to give another season of sample size for the Celtics in particular, because their timeline since winning the championship with the injuries and then just the drastic overhaul to the roster by getting rid of your finals MVP, it's going to be interesting to see, because I now put a lot of trust in just like the Boston Celtics structure, their culture, their system, to your point, the style of play that they actually rely on. Now, will that win them 16 games in the playoffs again? We'll have to see with Tatum, but the structure that team has, like the Nuggets went through a coaching change, as you mentioned, the Warriors haven't gone through a coaching change, but that roster has aged so considerably and injuries have affected them as well. The Bucks had multiple coaching changes. The Lakers had coaching change themselves, a couple along the way there, but also lucked themselves into a certain degree into Luka. And then the Raptors had a coaching change and a whole rebuild during their time since winning a championship. So to your point about just like how long one season can be and how hard it is to keep that together, like we've talked a lot about it this summer about Bucks culture, needing to reestablish that and all those things. But like, that's why, to me, looking at this list, like the Celtics, again, smallest sample size of who we're evaluating, but I have so much trust in their culture and their structure that is kind of like, even if they don't win the championship this upcoming year, I feel like they're going to be and find a way to continue to be contenders for the years to come.
I want to ask you about one other number that stands out, and then is there a team to kind of learn from and say, of the group, this is the one who's done it best? So we'll run through some of those comps once again coming up after this. First, let's talk to you about our friends over at FanDuel. Baseball fans, if you know who's hitting a homer today, FanDuel is giving you a chance to call your shot with daily dingers. It's easy to play. You just make your free pick for who you think will hit a home run in their game. If you're right, you'll receive a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. Best of all, you can make a pick every day throughout MLB season. Daily Dingers is another fun way to stay engaged with every day's games, whether you're following your favorite team or keeping an eye on matchups across the league. Every game has someone capable of going deep. Now you get your chance to make your prediction before first pitch. Sometimes it's just as easy as keeping an eye on the ballpark if you're playing in a place where the ball seems to fly out of the yard and you got a home run hitter on that squad, you got somebody that's been on a bit of a hot streak, or a favorable pitching matchup. There are so many factors that go into choosing who is going to be your home run hitter. So, are you ready to play your game today? Join all the action at FanDuel.com. That is FanDuel.com to play daily dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of the MLB. So I want to get to the team outlook here in just a second, but the number of 12 for playoff series 1 in total by the last 7 teams to win a championship, I think is pretty jarring. So is this one. The last 7 teams, excluding the New York Knicks, have fired. I suppose we should be careful with the wording of that because we haven't officially. There's a lot of ambiguity with the most recent coach there. I'm just going to go ahead and assume if you're getting paid, that was the decision to be made. So the last 7 teams to win a title have fired a combined total of 7 coaches. I mean, granted, 5 of the 7 have come from the Lakers and the Bucks, but still, 7 coaches have been fired by those 7 teams in the last, 7 years? 7 years.
That the laugh said it all. Like that's hilarious to say, but like I get it because it's something that we talked about as well on the show with the firing of Mike Budenholzer, where it's like at that point in time, the roster kind of was what the roster was going to be, or so we thought before they pulled off, a Damian Lillard trade. But it was kind of like they felt kind of locked into what they had. And a lot of times when that is the case, the easiest lever to pull of trying to make a change when you already feel like, hey, we have something good going on here, is making that coaching change of like, we can't whether afford to, or we don't have the flexibility to change this roster wholesale. So what we're going to do, the first thing we're going to try to switch is the head coach and see if that can bring new energy or new life into this roster that we already assembled that had previously won a championship. So I think for me, what that screams out even more than anything is just how many teams fall into that bucket of like, hey, this feels like the easier thing for us to switch right now. So let's switch this first. And if this doesn't work, then we'll figure out what big roster moves to try to swing on.
Yeah, I mean, the 2 that haven't done it, the Warriors and Steve Kerr is essentially Teflon there. Mm-hmm. And then the Celtics, and it's been so recent, and Joe Mazzulla's stock has really raised as well. So no real surprise there. And same with the Thunder. Again, it's just been 2 years now, but Mark Daigneault's in no danger right now of being fired. So I think it largely speaks to the makeup of your team, to your point of the roster, and we do have to make some changes. It is definitely easier to make one coaching change than it is to overhaul a roster, and especially when you look at those teams like Toronto, and that was more than anything having to do with, well, we're deciding to rebuild because Nick Nurse was still 500, I believe, his final year there in Toronto. So that was mostly predicated on we're going in a different direction. Let's include the coach in that as well. But the rest of these teams, the Raptors, we'll save them for a second. The Lakers are unique in that they're the crown jewel franchise of the league, right? The Lakers, the Celtics. So they're going to be able to attract stars, as we saw. It wasn't the Lakers front office or Jeannie Buss that recruited LeBron James to Los Angeles. It was Hollywood that recruited LeBron James to the Lakers. That one's unique in the comp. To me, it's really the more recent ones. The Warriors, I think, is comparable for the Bucks. The Nuggets, I've been screaming from the mountaintop for 2 years now, is very comparable to the Bucks, and to a lesser extent, the Celtics. But those middle 2, the Warriors and the Nuggets, I think the way they have played this is the exact same way the Bucks have. And would you say it's worked out better for the Warriors, albeit not great, but it's worked out better for the Warriors, whereas it feels like the bill is coming due for the Nuggets, and it's the same bill the Bucks were dealt.
I think the bills that both of those teams are getting are different. Where for the Warriors, theirs feels a little bit more ominous in the sense of like what's really still stirring the drink there is Steph Curry, who is aging at this point, and the team around him this season is not expected to be a championship contending team. Like it kind of is seen as being it is what it is at this point. Maybe they make some kind of swing at the trade deadline, wherever the case may be. But they're coming towards the end of an era where their rebuild is on the horizon. We just don't know exactly how quickly they're going to get to it, how much longer Steph Curry's going to play, and all those little aspects that go into it. But like for them, it feels like they're on borrowed time of like we're just trying to extend this window for our superstar. I don't see them being the ones to be like, we're going to break up this matrimony. Although one could look at the Bucks and say, who would have thought that they would break up that matrimony as well?
It's more complicated than that, but like it's. I think had the Bucks retained Giannis, it's almost identical to the Warriors. Granted, the Warriors got more titles to show from it, and they got that 2022 championship. But they feel, which is tough to say for a team with Steph Curry, they feel irrelevant. You know, like, oh, yeah, they still have one of the all-time greats. He's still going to do Steph Curry things, and he's still going to win a handful of games throughout the season. Can't say that I would feel like super confident going against Steph Curry in a playoff series, but I feel like I have the better team and I know what to expect from this Warriors group. Like that's what the Bucks would have. We talked about had watching what the rest of the Eastern Conference did too. If Giannis was still here, it feels like the Bucks would be the Warriors equivalent in the Eastern Conference of like, okay, you do have Giannis, you do have the best player in the conference, but you're still probably like an 8 seed, a 9 seed. Like, okay, like is that really mean something for this group? And that's where the Warriors have kind of lived since 2022.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I don't even think the Warriors are going to be in that category. I think the Warriors are going to be top 5 bottom teams in the West this upcoming season. And for Denver, we've talked a lot about the similarities between Milwaukee and Denver, and like Denver's not realizing where they are in their life cycle, but if they look to the Bucks, they can kind of figure out exactly where they are in it, because for them, like they won the championship in 23, and then they got to the West semifinals that next year, the next 2 years after that. But they won 57 games the year after the title. They won 50 games in 2025. They won 54 games last year. And them getting to 50 wins in 2025 is even more impressive now, understanding how much of a warring faction it was within that organization between the coach and then the GM and everything that went on with them. And they still found a way, 50 wins, so on and so forth. But now they're at that inflection point where it's like, hey, this offseason, you made a decision. Now we have to see how that decision affects your big superstar that you continue to build around. As long as you have him on your team, you're going to have somewhat of a shot. So I think Denver is an interesting one because the wins were always there for him. And like the Bucks, hey, they 1 seed after a championship 1 year. Like they also had that success. So Denver to me feels like the Bucks, but just 2 years before where we currently are with the Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're going to win 50 this year. And my big takeaway from it is these last 6 teams, again, we're going to leave the Thunder and the Knicks out of it. I think really starting with the Bucks, what you have seen is the impact of this CBA. Those first 2, the Raptors and the Lakers, were unique. The Raptors were a homegrown team, and they broke parts of that up to go get the mercenary in Kawhi Leonard, and it worked masterfully. It did its job. It brought them a championship, and they gradually saw, okay, even after he left, a tremendous job by Nick Nurse. We won 50-plus games, but we don't have the guy anymore. So that really lowers your ceiling. And then we saw the Raptors just kind of hover around, what I think 48 and 41 wins before deciding we have some nice young pieces. We're going to trade them off and we're going to start to rebuild here. I think they're unique from the rest of the group in that sense. The Lakers, as we talked about, the appeal of that franchise. I don't mean to disparage it because I know people do quite a bit at the 2021 title. There was quite a bit of uniqueness to the 2020 championship and the bubble format. So that's why I almost leave those two separate and say, okay, feels like we are still kind of coming out of one era that the Warriors dominated, and then the uniqueness of 2020 and 2021. We're just coming out of that, but it feels like there is where you started to see the impact of the CBA. And I know it wasn't all of this in place, but the carryover where you talk about what your window is and how it really feels like starting with the Bucks. You started to see the impact of this CBA and what it means for how you can retool and build on the fly when you have limited resources to do so. The Warriors have experienced that, where we talked about some of the trades that they made where you're trading an Andrew Wiggins contract to get Jimmy Butler, and Jimmy Butler gets hurt, and you're signing all these veterans and they're getting hurt, and it's kind of cemented you at a play-in team. The Nuggets, again, the similarities that are persistent between them and the Bucks. The Celtics have had to make a big move. Basically,
big moves if you think about it too. With
and breaking up.
Yeah,
and a huge one with Jaylen Brown. That it feels like starting with the Bucks, we have now started to see the impact of the CBA and how it shortens your window. Doesn't mean it shortens your window of being a winning team or a competitive team, but it shortens your window of this team is here to stay as a top tier title contending team for the next 3-4 years. That is no longer the case. It's you got one great shot, one really good shot, and then another year where if you can stay healthy and you get a lot of luck, we'll see how it goes. And then after that, the wheels start to fall off. So the Bucks have gone through it. The Warriors, as you mentioned, are kind of in this weird spot where it just feels like it's inevitable. Either you're going to continue to hover around 10 or you choose to rebuild, and then it's going to be painful. The Nuggets are just about there. It's the old meme of the Grim Reaper going through, and he's already got the Bucks, he's already got the Warriors, and now he's about to knock on the door for the Nuggets. Who knows what it means for the Celtics? But that, seeing it all laid out here with the coaching changes, the playoff series won, the playoff games won, and how similar it's been really for those last 4 teams especially. That's my big takeaway here is, this is a handful of things. It's the CBA. It's the way the game is played now. And it just backs up in my mind that your window is 3 years.
Yeah, it's a small window. And I think to add clarity on how I view that, I mean the window with the same core. Like I think you have to win on those margins and make the right decisions on the margins of who else you're adding into that equation, who you're moving for financial reasons or fit reasons, whatever the case may be. But you have to make sure that those moves on the margins for the role players, for the not superstar players, and all those guys who helped out that team, those have to be correct in order to keep that window open a little bit longer. Like I think in this current NBA setting, what you're just trying to do is be in a position to compete year in and year out. If you can be there and compete, you never know what's going to happen with the matchups you get in the playoffs. You might get favorable matchups along the way, how injuries shake out, just when you're playing your best basketball, so on and so forth. So last thing I'll say here, because I know you wanted to get to kind of like ranking these 6 teams of like who's had the best, or the worst time since their championship run. And I'll just put it like this. I think the Bucks are arguably 5th or 6th on this list, depending on how you want to look at it.
Right. Yeah.
And the only reason I would possibly, the Warriors and the Bucks are the two for me kind of at the bottom. The only way I would put the Bucks over the Warriors in this is because it's like the Bucks already pulled off their Band-Aid. We have to start this rebuild. We're doing it now. The Warriors still do have a Steph Curry who's seen as a top 15 player, maybe top 10 player in the league. So like you still have that, but the age of that player in the future outlook just isn't as bright. Meanwhile, the Celtics, they still have Tatum. You have that going for you. The Lakers have Luka.
Lakers are going to be able to sell. We're the Lakers too.
Exactly. And the Raptors have built something with Scotty Barnes and this defensive identity where it feels like they have a shot to be a team that's in the playoff mix for the next couple of years to come, especially if they keep developing. So what was your actual ranking of those teams, because I think I'd put the Bucks at 5.
I mean, I think I would put the Bucks at 6 just because the Warriors have at least won 2 playoff series
That's
in
yeah.
the Western Conference. It's going to be interesting to monitor Denver because I want to put Denver too far ahead of the Warriors. But I think in reverse order, I would go the Bucks at 6, the Warriors at 5, Nuggets at 4, Lakers, Raptors, Celtics.
I think that's fair. I would go Warriors at 6, Bucks at 5, Nuggets at 4. I think Raptors at 3, Lakers at 2, Celtics at 1, because the Lakers, they kind of just have an unfair thing kind of built
Yeah.
into
I
it.
mean, they got
And to have
Luka, but I don't know how much of that was the work of the GM.
but to have Luka like that, I mean, they have their next young star to build around,
Yeah.
so that works out for them.
Leave your thoughts. Leave your rankings. 1 through 6, who has done it best post-championship? Where would you put the Bucks? More importantly, Camille at 5. I have them at 6. That'll do it for today's show. As a reminder, make sure you check out the Locked On NBA show, as well as to keep you up to date on everything you need to get you through the offseason here. Still a handful of teams that have to make some personnel and roster moves. We're going to get to that coming up a little bit later here in the week, but make that your second listen of the day. And you can find it on YouTube as well. That'll do it for today. For Camille, I'm Justin. We'll talk with you guys once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.